really lovely to see so many of you here today. Welcome, all of you. And a special welcome to our panelists who will be introduced later, and to Mr. Diederik Samsom, who has been willing to reflect on the Mansholt Lecture later on. Dear guests, the world is on fire, quite literally. This summer, again, hundreds of acres, thousands of hectares were forests of nature were burned, and we lost a lot of nature in Canada, in Hawaii, in Europe. And thousands of people lost their homes, but also flora and fauna, local flora and fauna, lost their habitat. And at the same time, we see unprecedented floods, like recently in Libya, affecting the Lebanese people and their country. Biodiversity numbers are on the decline. Oceans warm up faster than we could have ever imagined. A recently inaugurated professor in Wageningen calls it a water cycle on steroids. And climate change plays a major role in all these events, in the frequency of these events, in the severity of these events. And long after that, the Global South experienced the effects of climate change. Now the Global North also feels it. And more each year. And gradually, we all start to realize that we need planet Earth in a top condition to survive as a species. But we are still not taking this serious enough. We are still not taking care of our planet well enough. Not for our children, not for our children's children. And I find this a daunting prospect. But then I met Tim. Tim van Hattum is our keynote speaker today, and I'm proud to call him a colleague. Tim is the antidote to climate doomsaying. There's no time to despair about the climate, he said decisively in a recent interview for the Dutch radio. We will make it work, he says, but action is needed. So on New Year's Day in 2020, Tim and his team presented the map of the Netherlands 2120. And that's 100 years from now, so it's looking into the future. And the first thing you notice when you look at this map and compare it to the map of the Netherlands today is that it is noticeably greener and more blue. So Tim and his team had come up with a sustainable future for our country, the Netherlands, a nature-based future. And it was at the time directly of interest to the media and to the people of the Netherlands. We were then, and still are, in a heated debate about the nitrogen climate. And after this focus on a current issue, a part of the bigger problem where we are all debating about, and it's a bitter debate, this map is a breath of fresh air. Finally, we did not talk about the problems of today, but we had an attractive future to look towards to. But to shape such an attractive future, we cannot continue on the current path. A transformation is necessary. A transformation as was foreseen by the name bearer of this lecture, Sikko Mansholt. It was a Dutch minister of agriculture just after the Second War, and from 1958 until 1972 he was the European Commissioner for Agriculture, and as such a founding father of the European agricultural policy. And in that role he was fully committed to innovating and modernizing the agriculture of Europe in order to produce enough and affordable food for all. But at the end of his career, he realized the drawbacks of this unimpeded production and the continuous growth. He was inspired by the Club of Rome and their book, which he read in a concept still, Limits to Growth. And Mansholt, who by then was still known as by his adagium, No More Hunger, since then advocated the limit to growth. He advocated a strong tempering of population growth. But also, until his death, he pleaded for the introduction of clean production systems. And we in Wageningen are honored to keep bearing that torch. Our knowledge and understanding of the challenges of today have evolved, and so has our sense of radical responsibility. For science and for Wageningen University and research in particular, our duty is clear. We have to ask the right questions. We have to fuel curiosity. We have to educate students and professionals. We have to forge bold partnerships, and we have to push the boundaries of discovery and applied science, all with one purpose: to make sure that the consumption and production systems are in balance and in harmony with our living environment. At Wageningen University and research, everyone, students, researchers, teachers, staff, has an intrinsic and pragmatic drive in shaping that future. And we feel it's our responsibility to share scenarios for sustainable futures, like we do today. We do so to share our knowledge, but also to inspire to action. So today we will hear from Tim van Hattum what a future in Europe can look like. Tim has studied environmental sciences at the Sjoukje at the University of Port Elizabeth and of course at Wageningen University. He has worked as a policy advisor for different governmental bodies and is currently the program leader Green Climate Solutions at WUR Environmental Research. So, Tim, where are you? There are you. Please help us reimagine life in Europe in 2120. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sjoukje. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, it's an honor to give this Mansholt Lecture here today and take you on a journey to a nature-based future for Europe in 2120 and discuss with you how imagining a nature-based future can help us accelerating climate action. I'm delighted to see so many people in the room, and especially so many young people in the room, because we cannot talk about the future without involving you. Last week, I finished the Jungfrau Marathon, 42 kilometers, 2,000 altitude meters, the most beautiful and one of the heaviest marathons in the world, in Switzerland. The finish of this marathon is next to the Eiger Glacier. And this is a location where you can see climate change straight into the ice. You can see the glacier disappearing. And like most glaciers in the world, also the Eiger Glacier is disappearing fast. And this will have major consequences for our fresh water supply. I often compare climate change and the climate challenge we have with a marathon. The goal is clear, 1.5 degrees. We need a long-term approach. We are running out of time. And the pathways to get there are extremely tough, like the Jungfrau Marathon. And I ran this marathon together with a team of climate experts, because we wanted to create awareness for the impact of climate change, for the importance of climate action. So we wore this climate stripe t-shirt. It reminds me a little bit of this carpet here. And here I am at 30 kilometers, still smiling, but we were walking with a mission. Our mission was, it is not too late to run for climate. That was our key message. And if you look quite carefully, you see my race number. My race number was 2120. Quite a coincidence. And 2120 is a special number. I recently discovered that 2120 is an angel number. It is a symbol for having a vision about creating a better future. And today, I will take you on a journey to that better future. But before we travel to 2120, I will take you to the world today. And this picture pretty much represents the world today. You could say the world is on fire and we still play a round of golf. We are very busy with solving short-term problems, but we know that climate change and loss of biodiversity are the challenges of the 21st century. And Europe is a hotspot of climate change. We have experienced this summer climate change and extreme weather events all over Europe. Floods, heat waves, wildfires, droughts. Europe is very vulnerable for the impact of climate change. And we need to act. We need to rethink how we create a vulnerable Europe. Our cities, our infrastructure, our agriculture is not designed for the new climate. And this picture gives an alarming message. It's a picture that was presented in the latest IPCC report, saying that children that are born today will experience at least 7 times more heat waves than our current generation. So climate change is, what we see now, all the impacts is just the beginning. The impact will get worse in the future, and we have to prepare for an at least 1.5 degree warmer world. But climate change is not the only challenge we are facing. Biodiversity is disappearing fast. Our nature and the state of nature is declining fast. The latest IPCC report, IPBES report, was crystal clear. Human actions threaten more species with global extinction than ever before, and 1 million species face extinction. And also Europe's state of nature is declining fast. 70% of our soils is degraded. Only 40% of our surface waters are in good ecological status. And 80% of our wetlands and floodplains are degraded. Nature is our safety net and essential to mitigate the impact of climate change. And we also starting more and more to realize that climate change and biodiversity are interconnected. Climate change is accelerating biodiversity loss, and biodiversity loss is accelerating climate change. So we need an integrated approach. And to finalize the alarming part of this lecture, I would like to show you this picture. It was presented last week in Science, showing the planetary boundaries, and that 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries have been crossed already. And that is bad news for the planet, and especially bad news for us. Each life support system has been so damaged that the planet is well outside a safe and operating space for humanity, was the message. And this is what happens then. It is not strange that all these alarming messages result in the fact that 75% of the world population now is very worried about the future of the planet. Children of present and future generations will bear an unacceptable high burden of climate change and biodiversity loss. And global studies reveal that eco-anxiety, climate depression, if you like, is a growing concern, especially among young people. And as President von der Leyen stated last week in the State of the Union, there is a strong need, especially by young people, for creating a vision for a better future. So, we need to change the narrative. We need to change the narrative to a narrative of hope and action. Despite all the alarming news, there's also good news. The IPCC stated that all the solutions we need to solve the climate crisis are already available. We only have to start accelerating climate action. And however, we are running out of time. It's not too late to act. So we have the solutions, we have ambitious policy, like the European Green Deal, aiming to become the world's first climate-neutral continent in the world. But what is lacking is our imagination for a better future, a Europe with healthy water, clean air, cheap energy, affordable food, and healthy and happy people. We lost our imagination for the future we want. We need cathedral thinking and use the power of imagination to create a sense of hope for the future and accelerate action. And an important part of that narrative is that we start realizing that the planet doesn't need us. We need the planet. We are part of nature, so we need nature. And our society and economy is built on our biosphere. And we need a healthy biosphere for a healthy future. Very nice represented in this picture, the wedding cake, the SDG wedding cake, showing that the life on land, the life in water, the availability of water, and climate adaptation and mitigation. If we don't give these SDGs the highest priority, we will never reach the others. And that's where nature-based solutions come in. We have to start working with nature rather than against it. Nature is our best ally in the fight against climate change. Our forests, our wetlands, our soils, our water systems can sequester carbon and create resilience for the impact of climate change. And nature-based solutions are not a replacement for rapid phasing out fossil fuels, but can additionally contribute to the Paris Agreement goals. And however, there is growing attention and evidence base for nature-based solutions. Large-scale implementation is still moving slowly. Only 10% of the climate finance worldwide is spent on nature-based solutions. So we think nature-based solutions need much more and higher priority. And we have to move beyond the nature-based solutions discourse, but towards a nature-based transition. And that is why, to create awareness for the importance of nature-based solutions, 3 years ago in 2019, 4 years ago, with a group of researchers at Wageningen University and Research, we want to develop a nature-based vision for the future of the Netherlands. Our country is facing many challenges. We are the most densely populated country in the world, apart from Bangladesh. We are a low-lying delta, and we are extremely vulnerable for the impact of climate change. And we still feel safe behind the dikes. But we can't continue with business as usual. Our engineered country needs to rethink how to make our country future-proof. We need a long-term vision for the future of our country, and nature-based solutions play an essential role. And to highlight this message, we thought, let's draw a new map of the Netherlands. And we wanted to show how the Netherlands can look like when we apply these nature-based solutions at a very large scale. And we wanted to show, and that's why we turned the map on the side, to give another perspective on the future of our country. And this map shows a narrative for the future some people desire, and I think a lot of people desire. So we have energy production at sea, wind, solar, hydrogen hubs, food production at sea. The coastline is growing with the sea level rise. We have lots more space for water, lots more space for nature, more forest, regenerative agriculture, and green, resilient cities in places where they are not floodable. And this was not a blueprint. We presented this just to inspire and to instigate discussion about the future we desire. Not to say this is how it has to be, but this is how it could be if we start working with nature. And very soon after we published this map, it was actually just before the COVID virus entered Europe, our map went viral. It was all over the place, in all the newspapers, on TV, on radio. Everybody was discussing about our map because it inspired people. And this is what people said, this is where we want to live. This is how we want our country to look like. And we were invited at many organizations, and we discussed with politicians, with policymakers, with ministries, with municipalities, provinces, about the future vision of our country. And everybody was very, very interested and enthusiastic about this vision. And the most important lesson I think we learned was that there's a huge need for a hopeful perspective on the future. Everybody wants to know where we want to go and not where we don't want to go. And one of the key questions that was asked several times was, the Netherlands was too small. Why did you only make a vision like this for the Netherlands? Should we not also do this for Europe? We even had a phone call with Diederik Samsom about this. And of course, that is right. The Netherlands is connected with other parts of Europe. And if you make a nature-based vision, nature doesn't care about political borders. So we have to think on a larger scale. And we should also develop a nature-based vision for Europe. And we have been thinking about this on the campus at Wageningen University. And we thought, okay, for preparing this lecture, why don't we start this exercise and just start doing it? So we collected and asked 50 students from different backgrounds, different nationalities, 20 experts to start designing the nature-based future for Europe. And we made sketches and all kinds of ideas, and we have had discussions with policymakers here in Brussels to discuss our vision and our ideas. And we worked on that for almost half a year or maybe longer. And we divided Europe in 5 ecoregions. So we clustered biogeographical regions in 5 ecoregions that are geographically and ecologically connected. And we defined 5 guiding principles for redesigning Europe. And the first one is maybe the most important one. We said we need a healthy biosphere as the cornerstone of Europe's future. Water and soil as guiding principles for the future. And we also said the future should be adaptive and resilient. We have to work with nature and continuously adapting to a warmer world, because climate change will not stop somewhere, but hopefully moving slowly forward. We want to move towards a climate positive and circular bioeconomy, a paradigm shift. And we want to move towards a nature-positive society, a society where everything helps to restore and protect nature instead of breaking it down. And of course, this future should be inclusive and just, where nobody is left behind. And based on these 5 guiding principles, we start designing and drawing a nature-based future for Europe. And this is a synthesis of that. This is the map, a first sketch of the map, I should say, of a nature-based future of Europe. And this map seems maybe not so different from other maps, but it contains a lot of information, and it's built up by different layers. And it's good to peel off these layers to see what stories and nature-based solutions we have thought for the future of Europe. And the first one is about healthy water and soil. Because healthy water from source to sea and vital soils are the foundation for a healthy and resilient Europe. Water is our most precious resource and our lifeline to the future. So we've designed blue-green landscapes with increased retention in upstream natural systems that increase the sponge capacity of our landscapes to create resilience for floods and for droughts. More space for rivers as ecological corridors through the European landscapes. And restored wetlands to store lots of carbon, prevent floods, and nature-based coastal protection that we need because the sea level is rising. Regenerative water and soil management has resulted in creating resilience for flood and droughts and restore biodiversity in Europe. And apart from water, of course, we also have a lot of nature. We have been seen that nature is an essential part of our society. So in 2120, we will have much more nature. 30% at least of the sea and 30% of the land is now protected and restored nature. And we will have a network of ecological rewilding corridors that connect European landscapes and nature. And we will have much more forest, climate-smart new forests and existing forests that contribute to carbon storage, but also to the bioeconomy. Investment in nature restorations resulted in increasing ecosystem services, such as improved water and air quality, enhanced crop pollination, carbon sequestration, increased biodiversity, and resilience. So the future will be green. But of course, we can also still produce food. But food is being produced much more in balance with nature and within the planetary boundaries. In 2120, Europe has a sustainable food system that is regenerative, nature positive, and circular. And farmers do not only produce food, but also biomass for the bioeconomy. And farmers are the stewards of the European landscapes, not only responsible for producing food and biomass, but also to restore and maintain biodiverse landscapes. And healthy soils are the basis for producing healthy food, mainly plant-based food, by using agroecological principles and adopting a circular food system that emerged a new paradigm. And we don't only produce food on land, but we also produce food at sea and in coastal areas where you have more saline agricultural activities. Healthy and affordable food for all is the message. And the shift to a resilient and nature-positive food system has improved Europe's resilience, biodiversity and health for millions of Europeans. And in 2120, most Europeans still live in cities. We will have walkable cities, where most daily needs are within a short walk or bicycle ride from home. Cars have been banned from city centers, creating much more space for green areas and improving air quality. Cities will be green and healthy, with much green public space, urban forestry, and open water. And of course, cities will be connected by high-speed railways, because we want to move not by plane, but still travel to several cities around Europe, of course. And this was a nature-based Europe in a nutshell. There's much more information on the map and much more information in the report, but we see this as a first step, and the synthesis of all these themes is this overall map. And again, this is not a blueprint, but to inspire and set the discussion about a nature-based future we want. And there's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. Every region, every eco-region has its own challenges and its own nature-based solutions. For instance, the Mediterranean region that is already impacted by climate change on a very large scale, with droughts, with heat waves, with wildfires. It is essential to rethink how the Mediterranean will look like in the future. And we have to start thinking about that now. We have to start thinking about water retention in blue-green landscapes, but also about climate-smart agriculture, because we have to produce food with much less water in the future. Drought-resistant crops, smart irrigation, agroforestry, but also how we can protect the coast with protecting marine areas, coastal protection, for instance, with kelp forests or reefs that can help restore biodiversity and protect the coast. And the Atlantic region, also facing many challenges, is the most densely populated area of Europe, with low-lying areas and rivers connecting the hinterland. Huge challenges such as sea level rise and large pressures on biodiversity are already there. So, several nature-based solutions can help solve these challenges. For instance, nature-inclusive energy production and food production at sea. Nature-based coastal protection. So not only civil engineering solutions, but also start working with nature and improve the ecology of coasts. Regenerative agriculture, because the best and most fertile soils are in these areas. So we need to have and rethink how we produce food there. And of course, we have to think where we start and build new houses on the higher areas that are not flood prone. We need a nature-based transition and accelerating the ways to get there. And we think that Europe is at a critical moment in time. It can not only show leadership in becoming the first climate-neutral continent in the world, but can also become a global leader in nature-based solutions. It can be an ambassador for future generations, a good ancestor, if you like. And this picture, if it's coming, this picture is showing that there are several pathways to the future. And we focus a lot on the pathways to the future we don't want, the red lines in this IPCC picture. But I think, and I'm convinced, that we need to spend much more time and effort to focus on the future we do want, the green line, and the nature-based future of Europe to get there. And there are several pathways to get there, but I think we have to take the green pathway. And this pathway reminds me a little bit of that Jungfrau marathon. It's an uphill marathon, which will be very, very hard. But we all have to run this marathon. We should all take the effort and put energy forward to go to the finish and to this nature-based future of Europe. And to finalize, I would like to say that co-creating an inspiring and long-term vision for the future of Europe can help to create a sense of hope of what is possible and what is desirable. We strongly believe that an inclusive European-wide process on several scales, European scale, eco-regional scale, but also smaller regional scale and even at city scale, can help to design nature-positive futures and accelerate climate and biodiversity action. And I call to everybody in this room to make that first step, to start thinking about these nature-based futures, create coalitions with businesses, with scientists, with policymakers, and especially with young people to start designing that nature-based future. We can do that. I believe it. And we have to start today. Thank you very much. And I would like to say one more thing, because I really would like to thank everybody who contributed to developing this nature-based vision for Europe. We have almost 50 students, a whole group of experts. We have been working on this quite hard to make this message, and I hope it will help us forward. Thank you.
Congratulations, Tim.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm forced to reflect on the fact that yesterday I was due to become a grandfather again. It didn't happen. My daughters are always 2 weeks late. But your third or fourth slide, which showed the future for children that are born today, struck me very hard at that moment. Because I thought about my grandchild, who may be alive in 100 years, if she lives that long. That's a future that I want to change, personally, and I hope we all feel that as well, on the basis of what we've just heard from Tim. Now, that's all the reflection I want to have at this point. I'm going to invite now Diederik Samsom, who is... I'm going to give you your title, but you may want to edit that when you come up, because things have changed. Head of Cabinet of the European Commissioner for Climate Action, and he is going to give us around 10 minutes of reflection on what we've just heard. Diederik.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, first on that title, I'm currently head of transition for the Commissioner Designate for Climate Action, called Wopke Hoekstra. I have to get the guy through a hearing in the European Parliament, because the beauty of these magical machines called the European institutions have one particular element which is actually really great. You can only become a commissioner after you've been grilled, literally, well, figuratively, for 3 hours by the experts of the European Parliament, the people elected by the European population to preserve our values and our future. And those questions are tough. So at the moment, Wopke Hoekstra is studying. Back to school. Let's see, 2nd of October. You can all watch that one. Because there's a lot of criticism on the European state of democracy, but a commissioner having to go through such a hearing and then having to go through a plenary vote of 705 MEPs before he can even start his job, I would argue there's no other European country doing that type of democracy. Back to Tim. Thank you very much for your inspiration, and it brought me indeed back to, what was it, 4 years ago, I think, when indeed I sort of, well, I couldn't miss it if you, as you've shown, it was all over the Dutch media, this beautiful, inspiring map of Netherlands of the future. And indeed, my first inclination was, let's call these guys and ask them to build a European map. I don't know what happened in between, but you made this European map. I think it wasn't thanks to the Commission, and especially not to me, but you did a great job in inspiring. But let me serve the, let's say, awful job of bringing you back into the reality of today. Because this inspiration is great, and I'm obviously preaching to the choir here. But 2120 is a hell of a long time forward into the future. And at the moment, there's simply too many Europeans worrying about the end of the month to be able to worry about 2120, let alone another year into the future. We need to convince others than ourselves to make this happen. And that's actually been the struggle of the Green Deal from the beginning. Because when we designed the Green Deal, it had a few particular characteristics, and one of them was, different from the past, that this time we didn't design 15 different plans for 15 different problems and then discovering that some of them work against each other. No, we made one plan for saving the future of our planet, starting in Europe. And come to think of it, there's nothing more logical than that, because there's only one ecosystem, and within that ecosystem, everything is connected to everything else, so you need one plan. And that one plan was politically, had a savvy design, because it started off with climate and energy. Because you have to do things in chronological order in order, well, if you go through the reality of politics of today. So we started off with climate and energy. And why did we do that? Because in the last 10 years, climate and energy acquired a political business case. So as a politician, you get more important, more popular, bigger, more votes if you talk about climate and energy, which is a completely different situation from 10 years ago. Some of you might remember that time. But nowadays, it is. So, serving on that political momentum, we thought we should start off with climate and energy, and then run into the other aspects of saving that single ecosystem, biodiversity being obviously the most important of those other aspects. But then you discover one peculiar fact. Birds and bees, biodiversity, does not have a political business case. Far from that. As a politician, you don't get more important, you don't get more votes, you don't get bigger if you talk more about birds and bees and trees. And that's hampering us at the moment. And that's the challenge we all have, to overcome that hurdle. And there's several ways to do that. And with climate, if you look at the climate and energy discussion, there's obviously one very concrete aspect of why did it get a business case, a political business case. Yeah, that's because it got a real business case. Innovation brought renewable energy to our doorstep at prices that we can all afford and actually make profit on, and well, then it's not too gutsy for a politician to start talking about those things. Birds and bees don't have a real business case, and I guess they won't have a real business case in the foreseeable future. So we need other elements to convince our society to walk this, or to run this Jungfrau Marathon. I think there's 3 elements that we need. One of them is a clear connection to the climate and energy case. And it might sound opportunistic, so you bolt something on something that runs like a train, so yes, let's piggyback on that momentum. But it's actually, as you said, not just opportunistic, it's fundamental. You solve both, or you solve neither of the 2 crises, climate and biodiversity. So they are connected. And we need to make a more convincing case to society to connect those 2, because literally in parliaments all over Europe, including the European Parliament here in Brussels, during, for instance, the discussion on the nature restoration law, half of that parliament, well, a little less than half, luckily, but still, half of that parliament was arguing that they were in favor of doing something against climate change, but not against the loss of biodiversity, creating the fallacy of 2 separate political pathways. And we need to connect them. And your map helps connecting that. So thank you very much for doing so. That's one of the 3 purposes that your map is already serving now, but we need to make it stronger. The other thing we need is more inspiration, and you embarked on that during your speech at great length, and rightfully so. So far, the discussions about biodiversity, about preserving our nature, have been too doomy and gloomy about not being able to do whatever we want to do, or not being able to buy at the prices that we want to buy things. So things get more expensive and more cumbersome, and that's the price you pay for preserving nature. Well, that's not an attractive offer, especially not for a politician who wants to get re-elected. You need that inspiration. But we need, and I challenge you to to bring that inspiration forward in time. I would argue to tomorrow. Quite a hard job, but still, don't rest, don't sit back until you have brought it so much forward in time that it's an attractive offer in the political sphere, which means the next elections. And the third thing we need to do is repeat what happened with climate change and what brought climate change to the forefront of politics. And it's not something we can do, at least not people my age can do. It's what the young people can and should do. Because if you look back into recent history at the Green Deal and the birth of the Green Deal, it was obviously innovation, as I already explained. It was the political business case that was on the table, as I already explained. But it was especially the young generation that made it happen. The Fridays for Future movement was the most visible part of that. But actually, during the last 4 years, I've been discussing this issue with many people who think they are very important, and sometimes they are. So, ministers, high-ranking civil servants, CEOs of big companies. And the peculiar thing is, in all those conversations, and it happened now in the introduction too, it sometimes turns, or actually always turns at some point to their children or grandchildren, asking questions. Small ones about eating meat, bigger ones about going to Bali on a holiday, and existential ones. Hey dad, what are you doing to save my future? And if that dad happens to be a CEO of Mercedes-Benz, or something like that, it's a pretty existential question. I can assure you that for a CEO of Mercedes-Benz, a bad headline about Dieselgate is a bad day, or a bad shareholders meeting about smaller profits is a bad day. But not being able to give your children the right answer on such an existential question, that's more than just a bad day. I am convinced that at the kitchen tables of Europe, 200 million in total, things are changing because of the young generation. And I argue that the young generation should put nature and biodiversity at the forefront of those difficult questions that they are asking to their parents and others. Because so far it has been very successful in climate and energy. We are embarking on this revolutionary pathway towards climate neutrality. But we haven't gotten anywhere near where we need to be in preserving, restoring our nature and our biodiversity. And if this map and the people working on it, which are all young people, as I thought, can serve that purpose, this has been a very fruitful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diederik. Yeah, food for thought. We do want to have an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and a bit of backwards and forwards on that. But first, we've also got a panel to discuss some of these issues and to take these reflections further. And I'd like to invite them to come up to the stage now, please. Give them a round of applause as well. They've come a long way. So, there we go. Yep. What I'd like them to do after I've introduced them is basically to say 2 or 3 words about their reflections and perhaps something personal about the issues, going back to the personal aspect again. I'd like first to introduce Maheen Khan, who is sitting at the end there, International Climate Resilience Advisor at WWF, Worldwide Fund for Nature in the Netherlands, to Thierry Caquet, who is joining us from INRAE as the Senior Director for the Environment of the French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. Thecla Bodewes, who is figurehead for the Dutch Water and Maritime Top Sector, that's the commercial sector, business sector. And finally to Philippe Tulkens, who is head of unit Climate and Planetary Boundaries of DG Research and Innovation at the Commission, the European Commission. I think you'll agree we've got a very nice broad selection of people here to talk to us. And I'd like to go in the same order, actually, for your introduction. So, Maheen, would you like to start with a couple of words for us?
Certainly. Can everyone hear me? It's quite a bit of a pressure to be the first one to be speaking on the panel, but I will try my best. Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here amongst distinguished panel members. I think the question you were asking, Lawrence, is about our connection to nature or the importance of this particular topic today. Well, first of all, I really enjoyed reading Europe 2021-20. I spent a great deal of time reading it the last 2 days, and what I really like about it is some language, which is imagine, inspire, motivate, engage, and inclusive. And I think that's what was something that helped me on my own personal journey. I'm born in Dhaka, I'm from Bangladesh, and I had absolutely no connection to nature growing up. I grew up in a concrete jungle, which is the urban city of Dhaka. But my connection to nature was forged much later in life. In my late 20s, I'm in my mid-30s now, is when I went to Bhutan and experiencing the nature there, the way people live with nature there, how the culture of the country and the nature or the ecosystem of the country meld into one to produce the identity of the country. So that was, for me, my stepping stone into the world where I really feel that nature is everything. It's not separate from human systems, humans, nature. We are all the same. We are part of, we are one. We are together. So how do we build this narrative is very important, which is why I hold my current role, which is as a climate resilience advisor, try to push for the importance of nature in our everyday life, and also bring this conversation in the present tense. Of course, it's important to think about the future, but we also need to have that vision in front of us and produce the pathways towards it. And one thing I want to say is that I really hope when we have this conversation today and in the future that once again, we don't use nature for our benefit. And the one word that Tim used in his lecture was, we work with nature, we are in harmony with nature when we are going to solve the polycrisis that we are facing today. I will stop there.
Super, thank you. Thierry.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence, and thank you for inviting me to participate to this panel. I will start with perhaps some personal testimony of what is happening in the western part of Europe, because I work in Paris, my office is there, but I'm living in a small village in Brittany. Perhaps some of you have experienced the holidays in Brittany. Very nice place to be here, but sometimes in July, in August, it's raining there. It's mid, not too hot, not too cold. But for several years now, we've been experiencing drought, a lot of drought, successive drought. And for the first time last year, for the first time since perhaps the Second World War, there was no more tap water in some small villages. 700 villages in France, 200 in Brittany, which is one of the most humid parts of the country. People coming, say, no water. What was thought to be granted? You have water, plenty of water for washing and so on. No more water. So people were shocked, really shocked. Different generation. My father-in-law is 92 years old. When he was young, he had to go to the well, went to the bucket, take the water, and then water came. It was like civilization, if I may say so. And suddenly it disappeared. And people realized that water was essential for the life, for the private life, but also for agriculture. And Brittany is a heavily developed region for agriculture. 60% of the territory is for agriculture. And then we experienced food shortage for the animals. No more grasslands producing food. A lot of problems, and people starting to living the animals, to kill the animals, because no food for them. And then all the structure, the economic structure, the social structure was impacted. And the final problem, it was not as dramatic as in Canada or Greece this year, but we have forest fire and moorland fire. We cannot imagine what the shock was, because in this area with a lot of water, we cannot imagine having fire, usual fire. And then a lot of people said, okay, what is happening there? Is this only an extreme event, or is it something more let's say, deep in terms of impact. And they start to think of what could be the future. And for, let's say, 50 years, we have been fighting against nature with agriculture, trying to remove the hedgerows, to increase the size of the crops, the parcel for the crops and so on, the fields. And they realized that perhaps they were wrong. And they turned toward research, said, okay, what can we do now to reconnect with nature? And I think we have some of the answers, and Tim was very inspiring in this talk. And we really have to be the ambassadors of this new way to think the relationship between nature and human beings. I'm an ecologist from my background in science. For me, humans are within the system, not outside. But for many persons, they have been thinking about humanity as outside the system. We are using it, controlling it, but not part of it. And I think that climate change sets back to this basic thing that we are part of the system. And without collaboration with nature, we will not face all the challenges that we have.
Very nice. Thank you very much indeed. I feel some connection between what we've heard, also from Maheen. Thecla.
Yes. Talking about the top sector, I think it's also good to say that it's a public-private initiative.
Yes.
And it's not only the water technology and not only the delta technology, but also the maritime technology. So when I read the lecture of Tim, but also when I heard the stories today, and also your story about the glacier, where you did the marathon and you saw the glacier, you saw the results of and the impact, what it did on the glacier. I think that's also something that we see in the maritime industry. We have the rivers, we have a very nice project building with nature to solve the floodings in the Netherlands. We really did a good job already with that, but we also have a very shallow draft. And then suddenly our economy stocks because the ships, the inland vessels, they cannot sail. So we see it everywhere. And what is why I like the lecture of Tim, but also the philosophy he preached, I can say a little bit, is that it's not, we also need to adapt. So there is a realistic way to bring this future. We need to adapt, and we also need to earn money. So I think if we can do it and with an economic growth, and we can also do it that way, I think that makes everybody happy. And I live in the Netherlands, and I really like the Netherlands, and I like Europe. So I think it is still, as Tim said, a green delta, but make it greener. And I think we really need to do it now. We have, and that's nice of the top sector, what we encourage is the small and medium size, but also the innovations from the universities and from the research center to bring them to the market, the valorization, but also after the valorization, what we now say is, okay, if we want to walk this path, how can we earn money with it? So we do the innovation. We did a lot of innovations also, and we put them away, then it's nice for the researcher, but now show it, because we have a lot of solutions. If I see in the Netherlands what we can do, not only building with nature, but also with azolla plants, we have a lot of ideas, and I think just start with it. And if we can convince politicians that we can do it, just make some showcases, and then we can spread it not only in Europe, but also in Bangladesh and the rest of the world. Yes.
Super. Thanks for that complementary but contrasting presentation. I'm very curious now to hear what Philippe has to say.
Well, the Commission spoke very well, but much better speaking than me, so I don't think I have much to add, but I wish to first thank for having me here and for the inspiring lecture. I was aware of the Netherlands 2120 already, but this is another step. And I would say reflecting on the possible future is very important, but I think we should also use the examples of success that we had so far. Because in the past, with the first part of your intervention, you may seem, okay, everything is dramatic, we did nothing. This is not entirely true. We didn't do enough, clearly, for the environment, since a lot of destruction has been happening for decades. we never do enough now. But there were some successes. You asked for my connection with nature. My background is in climate physics, climate modeling, and I was not always a civil servant. I worked in research before. And my connection with nature came through sailing in the Netherlands and windsurfing in Oosterschelde, in this area, where, to this audience, probably you know this example better than me, where it was a unique case where they found a solution after the floods of 1953 that could preserve the ecosystem, the environment, the culture of mussels and oysters, and also was agreed to by environmental organization. And the government actually had to revise its initial plan. The initial plan was to put dikes everywhere and to have all this area a freshwater area, and therefore to destroy the ecosystem and modify it. While the co-action of these groups, fishermen and environmental NGOs, played a major role in forcing the government to ask the engineers to rethink and to develop these creative and innovative solutions that they have built around Nederland with these doors that can open and be shut. You know this better. I invite you really, if you don't know the area, to go and have a look. Those were called gray solutions, or are called now gray solutions. So maybe they are not the ideal solution for the future. Now we have to think a nature-based solution in this context. But the history of this area, in my view, is quite telling and could be connected in the exercise of looking ahead at the future, because there is a lot of potential with nature-based solutions. Probably we'll talk more about it. And those are serious solutions and credible, but engineers need to know that.
Super. Yeah, thanks. Back to the Netherlands again, and nicely, I think. I'm quite interested, we'll come out to the audience soon, but also we're live streaming on YouTube. So if you're watching on the live stream, then please post questions in the chat there. And there's somebody sitting at the back there who will feed them through to me on this, and we can feed those through also to the panel. I think one of the critical questions really is whether or not you think, I think you do think that large-scale implementation of nature-based solutions is important. Why aren't we doing more of it, is my question. I'm looking at you, Thecla, because you have a slightly different perspective on this, but yeah.
Yes, I have two perspectives on it. I think everybody wants to do it, but it is also, then I look a little bit to the politicians, also in the Netherlands. What we see in our departments in the Netherlands, there's not a lot of knowledge about how we are going to do it. And regulation is also, it's not written on this way of nature-based solutions. So I think if we really want to move forward, it's not only making the plans and have the good ideas, but it's also a kind of lobbyism that we need to do, and also to look for, we need finance. We have the ideas, everybody agrees we need finance, but we also need to maybe to scrap some rules or to make some rules. And what is nice is everybody wants it in the Netherlands. So what you see is now also that water and soil is mandatory for everything you do in the Netherlands. That is something that is revolutionary. And it's only decided, Tim, 1 year, 2 years ago? 1 year, two, yeah, almost 2 years ago. And nobody wants it, but it is something, it's nice. And we can also say, maybe the lecture of Tim, maybe the way we like to do it, maybe we can say that is mandatory, yeah? Maybe we need something like that. But what you see is also with building with nature, if they want to do something and it's calculated or engineered in another way, it's difficult to accept and to approve. So, yeah, unfortunately, in the Netherlands, it's if you agree on something and you're a politician, then they cut off your head if there's something wrong. But we need to have more pilot projects, and we really need to start it now. So I think we really need to help politicians how they can bring it in a positive way, because that's what everybody wants. But for sure, if you talk about young people, they want to see a future, and also and not only politicians talking about you are doing this wrong, And we need this positive flow, but then we also need to talk about the boundaries, because we always have boundaries, we always have hurdles, and we need to talk about it and how we can solve it.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned examples, and I'm looking at Thierry now because I think he's been involved directly with nature-based solutions in practice. So that gives me a nice aangever opening for...
Thank you, Laurence. I would just add something to what Thecla was saying, is that we have to change also our own norms, the way we think about nature, and the norms, the social norms. And I think that this starts frequently from the ground. And the examples I have in mind, it was funded by the EU. It's a LIFE project in the coastal areas all across France and other countries, where local communities take the opportunity of this program, this LIFE program, to say, okay, we know that sea level is rising. We know that we'll have experienced some erosion, some salinization of land, as Tim was saying. So, okay, what's the future for our own community? And they were involved in many transdisciplinary projects with, of course, scientists, but also local politicians, mayors or local authorities, and citizens as group of thinking together what could be the different future for the territory. And coming back to the picture that Tim showed with this path, they say, okay, we have three options on the table. One is business as usual, what will happen. The other one is no limit in terms of what is feasible, and somewhere in between, perhaps the most probable future. And they have a 4 years implementation plan, and in these different areas, they are now implementing nature-based solution toward the transition. Perhaps in some places they have to abandon. So okay, the sea will have won the game, but in other places they preserve. And this is this balance between trade-off and synergy that we have to forecast. And these examples may be used as, let's say, lighthouses, to take the coastal analogy, to see, okay, it's feasible, but we need to engage since the beginning all the stakeholders, even if they don't agree at the beginning on what could be the best solution for them. If they discuss, and we have tools, scientific tools, to organize this discussion, then it's feasible for them to adapt. And we need to have this to disseminate in other areas and use them as showcases, as we were saying, that it's feasible, and it's not always very expensive, no, provided that you don't want to keep it at its now. So you have to be more flexible, more resilient, and this may be, of course, at the cost of leaving something or paying for it. But if you consider the damage that you've avoided and the cost avoided, the balance is usually positive. And now we're trying to develop it at the full scale, at least in France. And we're discussing with colleagues and with Tim that it would be very interesting to have a network of such demonstration sites forecast, for example, by the EU through integrated programs.
Nice. That's also a nice opportunity, but I'm not going to ask you immediately, Philippe. I want to go to Maheen, because I know your background in the stakeholder social sciences might be interesting in terms of what Thierry was saying about stakeholder engagement and that being a critical aspect for success.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So I worked on a climate strategy for WWF Netherlands very recently with a small team in my office, and two of the main tenets of the strategy are nature-based solutions and locally led adaptation, or locally led solutions, which you were referring to. And so as we have ongoing projects, we are starting projects we have in the Netherlands, in Europe, across the Danube River, and also internationally, that are starting on NBS projects for example, disaster reduction and adaptation in general, which I can get into detail later on during this talk. Some of the obstacles to scale-based intervention, if I may talk about that first and then go to the stakeholders, is to implement such interventions, we need time. The solutions that are going to be reaped from these interventions require time. Nature cannot be rushed. And we need proper monitoring and reporting tools in place as well, because we need to demonstrate results of these interventions being effective to policymakers, to financial institutions in order to scale it up. But one of the things that I really push for in the office with our nature-based team is coming back to the design phase. When we are designing these projects, how are we designing them? Who are we talking to? Who is involved? How are they involved? And local people, local populations, local stakeholders have several obstacles, diverse forms of knowledge. How do you incorporate that into design, into planning, and into implementation? And that really requires certain level of expertise when it comes to engaging with stakeholders. This oftentimes gets overlooked because we are in a rush right now. And of course, we should be in a rush. We are in an emergency. We should be rushing for solutions. But if we do not take care in the design phase, then the solutions may not be what we are hoping them to be. And therefore, the large-scale intervention that we are so aiming for may be compromised. So the inclusion of local stakeholders, community members, I don't have to say this, I think every scientific journal report is reporting on this. We are talking about this on a daily basis. It is extremely, extremely important because these people hold knowledge that is unparalleled. I'll give a slight example before moving on. I was working on this project called Voices from the Frontline during the COVID crisis. I was sitting at home and collecting stories from all over the world. So I worked with someone who was in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the middle of a conflict, giving me a story, telling me how people who are amidst conflict, how they are building resilience or how they are sort of facing this challenge. So one of the stories that I came across while writing these was about Hurricane Mitch that hit Honduras, for example. And in a very remote community in Honduras, relief wasn't reaching people for weeks. And they had absolutely, as you saw during the pandemic, I'm from Bangladesh, I was in Dhaka at that point, all communication channels get cut. So supply of food, everything was cut, right? So people were not getting food. So what these indigenous women did is that they had this knowledge of a bread that comes from an indigenous root which survives floodwaters, which are flood resilient. And then they started feeding their families with that. This kind of knowledge can only be accessed when you have access to people, when you have the expertise to communicate and connect with these people. And I think with nature-based solutions, it is no different, or any other solution that we want to implement.
Thank you. Anybody been involved in a nature-based solution in the audience? And consulted on one? Just curious. No, okay. Oh, there was one, wasn't there?
Some of my colleagues, yes.
Some of your colleagues, indeed, yeah. So, Philippe, I saw you making more notes there, so I think you...
Well, because there's a lot of interesting thoughts. Of course, the European Commission cannot always offer the perfect solution that will work in every case, but we can offer some things. And we're actually doing things that are directly relevant, in my view, for the deployment of nature-based solutions. I'll take an example. Well, first, we have funded research since a number of years, roughly for €500 million, which is not nothing. And we hope really that the outcomes of these projects will be taken up by the relevant actors, and we are working on this intensively. And now we have a new policy stream since 2021 called the EU missions. There are 4 missions in the context of the European Green Deal, one on climate neutral and smart cities, one on adaptation to climate change, one on oceans, and one on soil. And nature-based solutions can serve several of these missions. I'll go further on the adaptation mission because I work on that one as deputy mission manager. And if you see the implementation plan of this mission, nature-based solution is at the heart and core of it. And but we wish to relate to the regions. This is not a research activity like any other, producing papers. The mission is not about producing science. It's about deploying and testing solutions on the ground. We have an overwhelming success with the participation to the mission because we're targeting 150 regions and local entities in Europe. We have 308. So now we have a major problem with the budget, but that's a detail, of course. But it shows that they are desperately looking for solutions, and they are pretty open to nature-based solutions. They just want to have the full spectrum of the solutions that they can implement. You were referring to knowledge and pilot projects. Of course, I believe the knowledge is there, but not always in the minds of the people who decide. And that is key. If you take the local or regional authorities, they need to be trained or advised to help them in their decision-making. I mean, it must be very difficult for people who have a background that is not related to this type of solution, or not even a scientific or technical background in the area, to judge whether a great solution would be better or worse than a nature-based solutions. Who can help them? This is what we try to do with the mission through the provision of technical assistance, in order to facilitate the deployment, to accelerate change, and promote actually solutions that have multiple co-benefits, such as nature-based solutions, and address the hurdles to their deployment. But we can't do that alone. We need all of you. We need the member states. This is critical, of course. But now I would say some people may be surprised that DG Research is engaged in that, which it seems to go beyond the policy. This is precisely what the concept of mission is about. We have invested billions for years in research. Now we have a major societal challenge, several societal challenges to address, and we want to make sure that the output of research innovation is being taken up to transform society.
Thank you. I heard money being mentioned a couple of times there, and we could probably come back to that, I think. Now, my colleague Jelle is standing at the back there, I think. Now he's standing at the back, and he has a microphone. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address one of our panel members? Here at the front, and please give your name and which of the panel members you would like to address, or all of them.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you very much for an inspiring talk and a panel discussion as well. My name is Leif Schulman. I come from the Finnish Environment Institute in Finland, obviously. And actually, I want to address the whole panel. Unfortunately, I can't really address with my thoughts only one of you.
That's fine.
What I'm thinking of here is that, or one aspect which is probably lacking from the discussion so far, is that actually for centuries, certainly for a century, most of humanity has really fought a war against biodiversity. So anything we do actually suffers from biological diversity. Our fields are monocultures. Our forests are often not forests, but tree plantations like the one we just saw behind you. Our gardens are lawns. Whenever we build something, we destroy all nature, even take the soil out, replace it with other soil, and plant something else, usually in rows, and exotic species as well. We weed, we eradicate, we poison. Anything we do is directed against biodiversity. So not only have we geared our production systems and our society, on an economic and technological level against biodiversity, but it's also very deep in our mindset. If we are really honest, most of us hate biodiversity. We like to sit in our patio, look at a nice garden, but when the mosquitoes come, we want to poison them. So given this, well, you may challenge, maybe my interpretation is incorrect, but I think it's not too far from the truth. Since it's so deep down in our mindset that it's very difficult to live with a diverse nature, how can we really change that? We can talk about urban planning, production systems, and so on, but it actually boils down to what an individual person wants. We don't want biodiversity. It's difficult, it's troublesome. It's even dangerous, scary. How do we change that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Maheen, would you like to come in first on that one?
I would love to. I think I
I can tell, actually.
I actually wanted to start the personal story with something about connection. And I was listening to both the lectures earlier today, and I was thinking there's a red line running through this, and it's about connections, right? So it's about human-nature connection, it's about climate, biodiversity connection, it's about science, policy, society connection, and a connection from the present to the future. And one of the things that I really feel in whatever humble experience that I've had is, if you go back in time, I'm a history buff, I love reading history, world history, and if you go back in time, you really witness to a time portal that global development, as we see it today, sitting here in this amazing, sound-proof auditorium, has been at the expense of nature. And that is because, primarily, intrinsically, our relationship with nature has been very, very different since the Industrial Revolution. And it's a very difficult question, sir. I wish I had a lot of time in the world, but it brings in so many aspects of the world today: politics, economics, society. But another word that I really liked you used is diversity, biodiversity. Are we really in it for diversity? Because honestly, only in the last decade or so, or at least the latter part of the last decade, have we really started talking about human diversity. Is that, are we going to live together in harmony? We are still fighting on that front globally. So we are basically fighting two fights: human biodiversity and biological diversity. And I don't have an answer to your question, but what I do have is that we need to restore nature, restoration of tropical forests, speed cleanse wetlands. 80% of wetlands in Europe has been destroyed. But primarily and fundamentally, we have to restore our relationship with nature.
Indeed. Thierry, yes.
Thank you, Lee, for this inspiring question. For me, the question is also the way we have been educated. And within education, I also include, for some of the audience, perhaps the religion, vision of the relationship between nature and humanity. This has a lot of pressure in at least some culture. I'm not a philosopher myself, but if you read the writings of Philippe, for example, which is a French author working on the comparison of the relationship between human and nature in Occidental culture versus Native American, South American culture. It's very, very different and very inspiring to see how these people will see our own relation with nature. They are totally different. And perhaps we are biased. We're all biased, of course. And what you mentioned about the mosquitoes and the garden, of course we experience it. But we can also, at some time during our traveling within life, take time to think about it and to change. It's maybe minor changes or more important changes, but there's always time to change. And if you look at the agriculture, because at Inouye we are, of course, well involved in this. When we look at the traditional agriculture in the French West Indies or in the Caribbean or in Africa, the question of diversity in agriculture to produce food is tackled totally differently, because you have those small gardens with perhaps 30, 40 species cultivated together with animals. And they produce food. Of course, it's at the scale of the home. You have your own production for food, but there is no struggle against diversity. They use diversity, they not control it. They have this diversity of plants with some that are within the roots, in the soil, the trees, all kind of agroforestry, native agroforestry, if I may say so. And agriculture is not opposed to biodiversity. It's the way you are implementing it and the way you think about the way you can increase production that change the world. So I'm not convinced that we are always against diversity. It's our background, our culture, and we can try to change it. And the lecture by Tim is inspiring in this way. We can change our vision. Nature is not against us. we have to collaborate and to cooperate with it.
Super. I don't think I need to say any more after that. Philippe and then Thecla.
Yeah, very briefly, but your question is too complicated for me, so I'll give an answer not to the question. But it points out the contradictions in human beings, of course, we all know that. We are full of contradictions. And in this room, the Academy of Science, I think it's very important to remind people that the transition is extremely demanding and will require scientists to work with economists, with psychologists, with lawyers, with sociologists, whatever, all the discipline. And this interdisciplinary approach, where Wageningen is well known for being amongst the leaders in Europe on that, is absolutely fundamental. Because those who decide, who take decisions, are senior, and they have not been trained in several disciplines, most of them. The younger generation is more advanced than the more senior ones. And what I see in decision-making in the European Union at every level is that the type of training that people had influences quite a lot their approach, their thinking, and in the end, the decision. So therefore, I would plead strongly in the Academy of Science to ensure interdisciplinary work across social science and natural science, to work with economists. This is, in my view, the weakest point, to make sure that the economic case for nature-based solution is being reinforced, the business case itself. Yeah. Because here we talk about amongst converted, but we need to go out and talk to economists, to people working in finance, in their language, to convince them. Yeah.
Thank you, and that I think is a nice.
Yes, just very short, because I fully agree with the rest of the panel. But what I think is also knowledge, and not to say that you are old. Sorry for to say, but you are an older generation, and all the young people here we have. And I think it's not, if you don't know what you're doing with the earth or with nature or biodiversity, then you just do your best and you work like that. But I think the knowledge, to have the knowledge that you really destroy it. So I think maybe it's also a good question, because we have now we have an urgent call if we saw what happened only this year already in Europe. But I think if you ask young people, then they talk completely different. They understand and they think in another way. And that's what you see. I also see people buying houses. First, they want no garden because it's no green. That's easy. Then you can go on holiday easily. You don't need someone else to take care of your garden. But I think there is not one young person thinking like that. So maybe we can get a question from a younger generation.
So, wonderful, thank you. We have I think, a younger generation here at the front. That hand came up first. There's a little clock in front of us which is ticking down. It says 48 seconds, so I'm going to ignore it for a couple more minutes.
Hello.
Please.
Is it still on? Okay. Hello, my name is Noah. I study landscape architecture in Wageningen. I was part of doing a design challenge for making this map. I was invited to come and sketch on the first sessions. So I'm very happy to be here, and it's nice to be able to say something. I was inspired by everything that was said by the panel so far. I've heard pilot projects, I've heard hope for actually what we are going to do as young generation. I think it also gives us a lot of trust, but also responsibility, which is sometimes also a burden, I think. It's also good to mention. Actually, my question is back to the map, because we are not seeing it now on the screen, and I'm wondering why. There's so much in the map, and there's a lot of things to think and to discuss about with everyone and with different countries, not only from the Netherlands, because now only a specific group of people have made this map, and I see that you're also saying that it's good to include the local community and the inclusivity of the landscape. So my question is, what's next, and when will we come back together to design further?
Well, I don't know if the panel can answer that question, actually, but
The Commission.
yeah, well, I'll come back to you very quickly in a second. You gave me an opportunity to say that upstairs, when we finished, we have a reception upstairs. There are two maps. The map, repeated twice. One is on the floor and one is on against one wall. And I invite you to, there are small stickers that you can put on the map in a particular place, or where you can put a comment or a thought in relation to what you've heard and feel today. So please do that when you go upstairs. Philippe, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, to pick up on the
On that.
suggestion, what's next? I can offer you to follow the mission, relate to the Dutch regions participating to the mission. The Dutch are very active, but you can go beyond if you are interested in other areas of Europe, and see how this map can be used in their context, their local context, to progress the dialogue on pathways to resilience. This is a concrete step. The mission is open. You can participate to the activities. So you can participate to the forum of the mission next year, and we'll be very happy to do more than just words.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure there'll be a chance upstairs to talk a little bit about where to go with some of the people here as well. I can see Tim nodding. So behind him is Bertram, his colleague, who also was heavily involved in the report. And those two have some pretty good thoughts about it, I think. We've got a very little bit of time left. And it's with actually some sadness that I want to ask the panel if you have any words that you would like to leave us with before we close the session. Let's go in the reverse order that we went in when we came in. Philippe.
Well, it's to remember the positive signals that we heard today. The challenge is daunting, but there are many, many solutions. And actually, they are unexploited, many of them. And we all can be actors of the change by exploiting and disseminating the knowledge, reaching out to the actors to bring the transformation on the ground.
Super, thank you. Thecla.
Yes, for me, we have. I'm jealous because you only have 4 or 5 missions. We have 22 in the Netherlands, too much. So that's for. I think it's better to focus on a few missions, and then I think just get started. The Dutch Growth Fund. So there is money for it. So I think we just need to do it and also convince all parties involved to come with us, because we cannot do it alone. You need to have the industry, you need to have public parties, you need to have the universities, everything. And I think that's I really like to start tomorrow.
Super, thank you. Thierry.
Yes, I will say that we're talking about a vision of our common future. We heard a lot about transition, transformation, and you may perhaps think about it in terms of resignation, but for me it's inspiration is the word. That's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Maheen.
First word when we started, and now the last word when we are ending. No pressure.
You manage it.
I have a couple of things which are basically just reflecting on what all of you had said. I'm very excited about Europe 2120. I'm very excited about NL 2120. And maybe many of you don't know this, we also have a Delta plan for Bangladesh, which is 2120, which was also very much in partnership with the Netherlands. I'm also very much looking forward to talk on that next month. But we must not forget a few things. One is justice, which is just transition. We have to remember that as we transition to a nature-based economy, we should take into account the trade-offs, the opportunities, and the threats that it might create along the way. Another thing is about knowledge, which is pluralism. Now, you might be wondering, we're talking about EU 2120, and where does this girl from Bangladesh sitting here in the panel suddenly come from? But I work in WWF Netherlands, and I'm working with the Dutch policies. I'm also working with international policies. And one of the reasons when I asked my boss why he hired me was because I was from Bangladesh, was because of the experience, the knowledge that I have been able to obtain over the course of my diverse experience in the work sector, and especially Bangladesh being such a vulnerable country to climate change. We have a climate movement which sprouted from the environmental movement, which came from the environmental justice movement in the 1970s. The environmental movement got overshadowed by the climate movement, which is very much about ending fossil fuels, which is absolutely very, very important for us to keep shouting about on the top of our lungs. But at the same time, we also need a movement on valorizing nature, on the importance of nature, the role that nature plays in every day of our life. And I think that's the movement I hope that all of us who are in this room today can start from the next moment. That's how I will end. Thank
Super.
you.
I'd like you to give this panel a big round of applause. They've been great. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's hot up here, by the way. So never mind the pressure, there's also the heat. That was wonderful. We've run over a little bit on time, 5 minutes or so, but I really don't mind, because I think it was really important that we had a chance to hear from them, and also that you were able to ask a couple of questions. Next time we'll ask more. But don't forget that you can still ask us questions, and that we are here to answer questions about some of these difficult issues. We talked about youth a lot. One of the people who was involved with the process and was a student at Wageningen, and now is actually a researcher at Wageningen, is Nafsika. Nafsika Makridou. That's about right, isn't it? And I'd like to invite her up onto the stage to give us basically a call to action, which I believe is going to be from a personal perspective, and over to you. I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. The first time I felt a connection with nature, I was around 4 years old. It was the moment I got my first diving goggles from my uncle. And it was the moment I stepped into the Mediterranean Sea, and I just felt the sea surrounding me. And it was the beginning of my feeling for this new world that felt as my home. And at the time, I didn't understood that I was human, that I wasn't born in the sea. And that same uncle that gave me my diving goggles taught me then a very important lesson. And he told me, Naf, you can love the sea as much as possible. You can enjoy her as much as possible, but one thing you should never, never, never forget is to always respect her. Respect her power, respect her balance, respect her wisdom. Because otherwise, she will get to you. And it is not her intention to hurt you or to feel your pain. But it's just how she works. It's just how her balance works. And for the last couple of centuries, we as humans put ourselves above her power, above her balance. And it is time for us to be humble and to put ourselves below her balance again, and to listen to what she has to say, and to lead us the way, because then she will give us the power to save ourselves in a type of way. Maybe you're asking yourself why you're staring at this picture. Well, when I was asked to tell her my story, I was thinking what I should say, what I wanted to tell you, but it just didn't came to me. And 1 month ago, I was at Sunil. That is the point of the peninsula at the quay where Athens lies on. And it is a cape surrounded by the sea. And it was that moment that my story came. When I felt the power of the sea, when I felt the power of the wind, and when I felt the power of the sun, because it was sundown at the time. And it is important that to know that the ancient Greeks built here the temple of Poseidon. And it was no coincidence that they built it here, because they felt the power, they felt the balance, and they felt the wisdom. For me, in my opinion, we need to listen to her again and to feel her power and to feel her wisdom. So, if you feel comfortable enough, I would like to ask you to close your eyes, please, and to think and to feel about the first time you felt the connection with nature, and you felt the love, and you felt a part of it, because that is what we need right now. Thank you for your attention.
Super. Fantastic.
Thank you.
I think Nafsika's mum is in the audience. You must be very proud of her. Okay. Not a dry eye in the house. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, we're at the end of what's been a wonderful afternoon, I believe. And I'm going to leave the stage and not come back. We look forward to seeing you upstairs. Please write on the maps, whatever you feel like. And I'm going to ask our president, Sjoukje, Heimovaara, to close the meeting for us. Sjoukje, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your beautiful personal story and taking us all inside to feeling what is important. I will highlight a few observations. I will in no way try to summarize, but I thought it was very illustrative that Tim started with a marathon, which was a long and tiresome struggle uphill, in this case, up to the Jungfrau, to the views that are there, inspiring views, and that was what today was all about. And you have given us these views, and we will go and get a look at them in the hall later. And at the same time, when you came up with the map for the Netherlands 2120, I remember that the Advisory Council for Science, Technology and Innovation in the Netherlands gave an advice to the government and the Parliament of the Netherlands of how to go about with societal transitions. And the most important thing they advised to the government was make sure you have an inspiring vision, a shared inspiring vision, so that not only we push towards innovation and transition and saying goodbye to old ways of working and embrace new ways of working, but also to draw towards this inspiring vision. Without this inspiration, without these views from the top or from the bottom, we will not get there. And that is today, then at 2020, the Netherlands 2021 map came out, and it was immediately used as an example of what we needed, and still we need it. And to my disappointment, in a way, I looked at the agricultural policy Sicko Mansholt, on this Mansholt lecture, tried to get accepted in the European Parliament in 1971, and it contained a lot of elements which we are trying to pass through European Parliament today. So we need to get moving, I think. The panel came up, and I really like that, like you did, with a lot of personal notes, personal visions on how we all experience that things are changing and that it affects all of us. But also the call for tangible successes and economic benefit. And in that point, I would like to take a small step sidewards to Michael Porter and its competitive analysis, who pointed to the importance of strong businesses on ecosystems, of a strong research and innovation system, on reliable government, and I think that has a lot to do with long-term vision, but also on the need of pressure. He claimed, and he even there's an article from him where he states that if you compare different countries and you take countries with a very strict environmental legislation, their competitiveness is certainly not less than other countries. So there's no thing holding us back there. And that also refers to what Diederik told us, feet in the clay, feet in the policy, we need to think about today. But we can only get there when we have this inspiring map of the future. And he called upon the younger generation to take these issues and to start the revolt at the kitchen tables. But I would like to extend this call to action. I would like to take us to ask all of us to take this to every table we see, because we need to tell the stories. There is, and that was something Thierry told me before the lecture, that if we look at the citizens' panels in France, which are gathered to talk about policy. When you take a random set of citizens, they're carefully selected to represent the population, and you inform them with experts. They are willing to go much faster and further than the policies. That's proven over and over again. So we need to go to the tables. We need, as experts, to share our knowledge and to share inspiring future visions. And that's what we did today. And I would like to close off with the Rockstroom. He was also the paper of the group of Rockstroom, which was shown here that we passed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. But this paper concluded that the window is still open and we can still be back at the safe and just operating space if we move. So let's move. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you upstairs.